Okay, this is basis 143, take 2, and we're at the UFO Academy with Awake and Aware. We make a little reference to that. Welcome, Lorraine.
Hello.
It's good to hear you and good to see you.
Thank
and
you.
You've published this wonderful book. That's Phantoms in the Night, or ETs. My lifelong experience in contact with the paranormal by Lorraine McAdam.
Yes.
So Lorraine,
yeah.
Take it away.
Okay. Can I just say that my book is available on Amazon, UK and USA, and also Ink Collective publishers, if anyone wants to buy it after this chat that we're going to have. So I hid my story for a long time. I believe I've been having contact since I was a child of 8. My first contact experience, I believe when I look back, was with benevolent, what I now know to be, some people call them Nordic ETs, some people call them Pleiadean. I don't know. I don't know exactly who they are, but I started to see these 2 men would project onto my ceiling when I was a child, and I would chat with them, but I have no idea or recall of what I said to them or why they did that. And my father actually caught me talking to them, and he asked me who I was talking to, and even as a kid I knew that my father would just think I'd gone completely mad, so I just denied it all and said I was talking to myself. And shortly after that they stopped, but then there was I had a really vivid dream of going out into the field behind my house and being greeted by this Pleiadian guy. I know now to be Pleiadian. He was blonde, long hair down to his shoulders, and he came out of a cylindrical shaped craft, and he hugged me, and he told me it was all going to be all right, and I was here for a reason, and I would find that reason eventually. And then things got bad when my parents divorced in 1974, and I went to live with my mum on this huge housing estate in Blackburn in Lancashire, where I come from originally, and I believe I started to be abducted by what I now know were the grey aliens, but I didn't know at that time what they were. I was absolutely terrified. I would see these black-eyed beings with the grey faces. I would catch sight of them. They would try and paralyse me, but I often broke out of the paralysis and tried to attack them and kick them, and I used to swear at them and tell them to leave me alone. And I used to say, go away in the name of Jesus Christ. And the reason for that was that I was brought up as a Catholic, and I thought that they were demons, in fact, because this is what the church teaches, that everything's a demon, basically. So I just said, in the name of Jesus, go away, because I'd been brought up in that culture, that Western culture that we're all programmed into. I had no idea what was happening to me. It was very frightening. I would hear a buzzing noise, and then I would black out, basically, and I would come to, and it would be the early hours, or it would be broad daylight, and I'd just complete blank of the night, completely blanked out. And I tried to tell my mum what was happening, but she said that I was just imagining it, and eventually threatened to take me to see a psychiatrist. So I gave up trying to articulate what was happening to me to my mum, and it was very upsetting and very traumatic. I don't know what they did when they took me, but there was one time that they allowed me to recall exactly what was happening, even though I was paralysed. I was pulled out through my bedroom window, and I was pulled up to a craft, and the craft was lit from the bottom. It was a sort of blue colour, a blue light, and I was pulled up into this craft, and then I just blacked out again. I was just absolutely terrified. And this was when I was a teenager. So this happened to me all through my teenage years, and there was one occasion when I'd been swearing at them and trying to get rid of them, and one night they paralysed me, but they didn't take me. They drew on the back of my nightdress, which was a winter one, and they drew Egyptian symbols on the back of my nightdress. Now I knew they were Egyptians because we've been learning about Egypt at school, and the one that they drew was the Ankh, the Egyptian Ankh, which is I know now that's quite a well-known symbol within ancient Egypt. And I thought, what on earth are they trying to tell me? But the worst thing was that I tried to hide my nightdress from my mum, and she got really angry and said I'd done it. So I got blamed for that instead of... She wouldn't believe me. She just said, you're being stupid, you're going mad. And then another time I got put back outside, and it was like they were doing this on purpose. And I was locked out of my own house. So I had to then knock on the door to get my mum to let me in at 6 o'clock in the morning, which, as you can imagine, she wasn't very pleased about.
But did that help your case by maybe showing your mother that you weren't imagining this?
It didn't. She actually accused me of climbing down the drain pipe and attention-seeking behaviour, and she threatened to take me to the doctor and the psychiatrist again. That's how she reacted. To be fair to her, I think she didn't know what to do with me. You know, I mean, imagine that your child is telling you these things. I also started to come back with marks all over my underwear, all over my nightdress. I would come back with my clothing stained. I would come back with strange marks on my chest, on my ears, on my knee on one occasion. I don't know whether they put anything inside me, but I know that when I go through security and things like that at airports, every single time I get searched, you know, with the thing that they whiz up and down your body, and they look at me very confused because they never find anything, of course.
But why were they confused? Did they see something that they couldn't detect?
Yeah, that she said to me, have you ever, these were her exact words, she said, have you ever had metal surgery in your knee? And I said, no. And I laughed because I'm so used to it now. And it happens every time I go for airport security when I fly internationally.
Up to this day?
Up to this day, yeah. And I was in New York and I triggered a lot of shop alarms, and I got chased by store detectives about 4 times. Because I triggered.
You triggered those?
I triggered the security alarms, yeah, in NY, yeah. So that's what happens, and I think these things have been put in me since I was a teenager. I theorise, I have no proof. So that went on from me being 12 till age 16, and then it suddenly stopped. And I thought, thank God for that. And I still, at that point in time, in the early 80s, I had no idea that I was interacting with ETs, but it was like the fact they put me back outside, it was almost like they were saying, trying to tell me we're not demons, we're not spirits. How can we put you back outside and with you locked out if we're spirits? You know, how can we write on the back of your dress if we're spirits? So it's like they were saying.
So they were getting you to get more confident that this was a real experience.
Yes.
So you weren't being taken out of body, you were being physically.
I believe I was being physically interacted with on occasion. I can't say that I wasn't taken out of my body on occasion, because sometimes I felt like I know I was pulled out of my body because I saw my body, and it was like they did it on purpose, and I saw myself lying there. And you're going to laugh at this, but I made myself jump because I thought, who's that in bed with me? Then I suddenly realised I was looking at myself from the outside. So I think
you were able to make your body jump?
Yes. Yeah.
Outside your body?
Outside my body, yeah. And it was like they were saying, look, this isn't you, this is just a shell or whatever. And when I used to say, go away in the name of Jesus, I used to get this quite harsh message saying, your God can't help you now. Your God can't help you now. Your God can't do anything to stop this. And yet I could break free from the paralysis on occasion and give them a thump and kick them and things, because I just wanted to kick them, which I know is very awful. So
you have fighting spirit?
I certainly do, yes, yeah. I was very angry with them because I couldn't understand why they were taking me in the first place, whatever they were. And it was quite funny really, because all my Christian friends, of course, went with the demon thing and sent the priest to cleanse me and cleanse my bedroom with holy water, and of course none of it worked, because it wouldn't, of course. And then thank God it stopped when I was 16, and then I started to have these what are called benevolent interactions with the blonde Nordic looking ETs, and they were, the first one I met of those was a very strange girl at the bus stop. I used to go to college to do my pre-nursing course at the bus stop, and there will always be other teenagers there going to do their courses. But on that occasion, I saw her twice. There was no one else there, and it was almost like I've been taken. I feel now, looking back on it, that I've been taken into some kind of pocket dimension, for once, or something. I don't know whether they have that technology.
Well, that's a pretty advanced term. Where did you find that term from?
I've read it when I've researched, because the book that, not Whitney Strieber, the other guy wrote from New York, Sight Unseen.
Okay.
Do you know the one I'm talking?
No, I don't. But for the purposes of the audience, would you describe the book?
And
what era is the book covering?
He was interviewing another woman that had been taken by the Greys, and I've forgotten his name. He was an artist in New York.
Okay.
It was called Sight Unseen, Intruders, something like that. And
Hopkins.
Bud Hopkins, yeah, it's one of Bud Hopkins' books, thank you. And he posited that they can create temporary pocket dimensions, the Greys, and also the Nordics, I believe, so that they can interact with you safely, and sort of communicate with you. Because I communicated, and this was the first time I discovered I could communicate telepathically with her. But I knew you could communicate telepathically with the Greys, because they wouldn't even let me open my mouth to scream. I wanted to scream. So I tried with her, and I said, "Who are you? Why are we just you and me here together?" And she just smiled at me. She was very benevolent, beautiful energy from her. I have a picture of her that my AI artist created, very kindly created for me, Lee Mertens.
Now, how did you create those AI artists? Because my experience of the AI artist is it makes a so-called alien face rather too human.
Well, I worked with him.
In other words, how accurate are the paintings and things?
Yeah.
How accurate are they to what you
use? They're very accurate, because I worked with him and he was very patient with me, which was wonderful of him. We went through about 20 different versions of her face, because I wanted to get it right, because she had very high cheekbones, but they do look very like us. They've maybe got slightly bigger eyes, but that's the only difference that you'll see. And I just wanted to get her right, so we went through about 20 versions of every one. What you see, the finished article, wasn't what we began with. Does that make sense? Yes. So that's how I know. And I have a really good memory for faces. My husband remarks on it. I can sort of see an actor in something serious and see the same actor years later in something else, and I'll say, "That's so and so," and my husband will go, "No, it's not," and it is. I've got this really good memory. So that's how we work together to create these. Another thing that happened to me at that time, and again, there is a picture that we created of him, but I went through several versions, was a strange Mormon, I'm going to call him, because, well, for one thing, Mormons never call without being in pairs. They're usually in pairs, as are Jehovah's Witnesses. And a lot of religious evangelizers used to come round our estate. It was like a magnet for them or something.
Why are they in pairs? Have they ever said that?
They're in pairs to protect each other, basically, but this one came alone. That's the point I was going to make. And he somehow, I think they control the narrative, the situation, because he somehow got me to open the door and let him in. And you're talking a 16-year-old girl, quite vulnerable, and my mum wasn't in. And all I can remember is he was sat on the couch talking to me, trying to tell me something. And I've since realised I've seen this man throughout my whole life, the same man, and he doesn't age.
What do you mean by since realised?
I've since realised that he is connected to me in some way from a past life that wasn't spent here on Earth, I believe. I believe I'm Pleiadean. He's told me I'm Pleiadean soul, a volunteer.
Well, continue.
Yes, yeah. But at that time, I didn't understand that. I didn't realise that I'd never met Nordic ETs. I'd never done the research. And do you know what I thought he was at first? I thought he was an angel. I wrote him off as an angel.
Now, why are you writing him off as an angel?
Because of my religious...
What's the reason religiously why you would write him off? Why light him up like
well,
that?
I was categorising him as an angel because it'd come at a time when I was feeling really traumatised by these visitations with the Greys, and I just felt like he was there to try and help me to deal with this and to realise that there's something that I had this closed mind because of my religious upbringing, and I attributed him to at that time, and his energy was so beautiful and it was angelic. I'll say it was angelic. It was so peaceful, and it was almost like he was trying to heal the damage they had done. This is what the impression I got from him, because I was training to be a nurse at that point. So, and back then you didn't do a degree; you just went into nursing school. So, and you trained on the wards, and for a long time after that happened, I wasn't bothered at all. I didn't see him, I didn't see the Greys, I was just left alone, thank God. All through my nurse training, because I lived in the hospital, I was just left alone. And I thought, I just wrote it off as experience. But then I was on nights with an Irish nurse, actually,
all right.
Lady from your own country. She was from Southern Ireland, and we both witnessed a UFO together over a field, because it was dusk, it was just going dusk, and all I can say, it was like a mini sun, this UFO, and it wasn't the sun, because the sun was setting in the distance, and we saw this sun-like craft, and she said, what the hell is that? She said, I can't do an Irish accent. And
Don't bother.
And she said the Jesus, Joseph and Mary, and she started praying, and I thought, that won't help. I instinctively knew that wasn't going to do any good. And we tried to tell the matron after, and then we were forbidden from talking about it. So this was the attitude in the 80s towards anything like this. So we were just hushed up, basically, and told not to tell the other staff or anything. And I felt really angry about that. And we talk about it on the bus going home.
Between who?
Me and the Irish nurse that had witnessed it, because we used to travel the same way together.
I'm wondering if they had other experiences that maybe they shared with you.
Who did?
The other nurses.
She didn't share anything with me. It was like, in the 80s, everybody just ridiculed it if you saw anything, or you'd occasionally see things in the papers. People claiming to have seen these things, and they were always ridiculed, weren't they? And to me, there's been a sea change in attitude now, and this is why I hid my story for so long. I kept it to myself for probably the best part of 40 years before I came out, because I was afraid for my teaching career as well, because I was working in further education, and I was scared to say anything or tell anyone. And as I say, I was left alone, and then I left the NHS in the early 90s, and I went to work in a private nursing home. This is the next significant thing that happened, and it was witnessed by 8 other staff. So you can't say this was just me. So this was so significant. And strangely, I just discovered Whitley Strieber, is it Whitney Strieber? Strieber, his book Communion. And for years I'd been in denial about the Greys and that they were ETs, and I'd wondered who the heck they were though, and I didn't want to admit that they were anything physical. And then I saw this face on the front of this book, and it literally sent me into a bit of a spiral of PTSD.
Now, what do you call PTSD?
Post-traumatic stress. I just went to pieces when I saw it.
So that face on Strieber's book,
yeah, it triggered me.
Was accurate enough to...
Yes, to trigger me completely into...
How close is that image to the beings you've been seeing?
Spot on, I would say. And it was a female face, I felt. It was one of the female who were a bit gentler, I found, with me. When I remembered bits and pieces, of interacting with them.
We'll go through your experiences. Open up.
Okay.
Do the whole thing.
Well, the male would just say things to me like, your God can't help you now, when he was quite cold. They came across as very cold. But when I was taken by one of the females, sorry, is that a wasp? I was taken by one of the females when I was at university, and I was I was very, very ill with flu, and this flu had been killing quite a lot of young people my age, and I was really, really ill, and I woke up to find her stood over me, and she was hooded, a bit like the one that was it Philip was showing us. He called him Noddy. She had the hood.
Describe that image, because people wouldn't have seen what you referred to as Philip.
Oh, okay. She had a hood on. Philip Kinsella, yes. She had a hood on, and she was stood over me, waving her hands over me, and it was as if, and she told me telepathically, "I'm healing you," and I said, "Well, thank you," and I could only think to say that I was so shocked, and she wasn't frightening like the males. She had a gentler energy, and she was stood over me, and after that I thought I was going to die. After feeling I was going to die of this, feeling so ill, my temperature went right back down, and I felt a lot better. I felt so much better. So that's an example of a benevolent interaction with what I believe was a female.
How did this all start with this particular event?
I was really ill. You mean with flu?
Yeah.
With the flu, I was really ill with the flu. All of us had got it. We were in halls. I was in my second year of my undergraduate English literature degree by that point, and all of us had got it, and I got it, and I thought I literally did think I was going to die.
What era is this? Did it have a name, this particular flu?
What, the ET?
The flu?
Oh, no, it didn't have a name. It was just a new strain, a bit like we had COVID. It was, do you want the year? It would be Yes, it would be 1991 by this point. And I was staying in a house with 4 other girls, and we all got it, and I got it the worst. And I was frightened after what I'd seen, but I didn't feel threatened by her. I felt like she was healing me. And I felt so much better after. My temperature came down and everything. So why she intervened, I have no idea.
And did this happen in any particular location, or did it happen in the home? Or the house?
It happened in the house. I just woke up and found her stood over me. It was an old Victorian house. They didn't have the wonderful student accommodation they have now. Back then, you just were put in halls, and they were very old, So it was an old-fashioned Victorian house that I was in, and she was quite benevolent, yeah. So that was quite significant, So I'm not saying they've all been negative interactions with the Greys. They've been a mixture, really. So I'm
interested if there's differences in the Greys that you're saying.
Yes,
could you describe that?
Yes, I think there are differences. The males there are little Greys, and they seem almost like biological robots, the way they react to you. It's almost like they're there to do a task, to carry out a task, to take you for whatever purpose, and that's their job done. There are the taller ones who was the one that said to me, your God can't help you now, and he actually also told me that my thinking about God was totally limited, and it was far too limited, which I've since discovered is absolutely true, of course, because we're just programmed to think God's up there in the sky like some kind of benevolent father sat on a cloud, aren't we, by the church. So he said, no, you've got it all wrong. And again, that's quite benevolent, isn't it? So there are different types. I think some of them are just little robots, basically, that do all the mundane stuff, and then there's the others that interact with us, and actually you can have a bit of a conversation with and reason with, even, to some extent. So but most of my interactions, most of them, my benevolent ones, have to say have been with the more blonde ETs, and don't make the mistake of thinking they're all blonde either. They're not. Some of them have got dark hair and blue eyes, and they're like us. They're a mixture of different. And I actually, when I was interviewed in Manchester at a strange interview just after I graduated, I met somebody that looked like he was from Africa, and he was working alongside or with the blonde Nordic looking ETs.
Explain this interview.
Okay, so I went, I was at the end of my degree, and I applied for what I thought was a sales job. And again, in Bud Hopkins' book, he explores this in the Sight Unseen book. He had an American girl who had an identical experience, which I do mention. So I believe it was a set-up when I look back on it. But I went to Manchester Victoria on my own on the train, thinking I was going to an interview for a sales job. And I have no idea or recall of how I got there.
I mean, how was the advert? Well, how did you know?
It was in the paper, of all places. And it was in a tiny box in the paper. And I remember reading it and thinking, oh, I'll try for that. Just while I'm looking, I can do that while I'm just while I'm looking for something more, waiting to go to teaching college, because I wanted to do my teaching degree. So I just answered it, and somebody answered the phone and said, yeah, can you come on such a day, on such a date? And I can't remember the address or anything that they gave me. And the strange thing is that I got off the train. I remember getting in a taxi, but I don't remember how I got there, which is weird in and of itself. And then when I did get there, there was this blonde girl sat behind a desk in a completely blank yellow room, nothing on the wall, nothing on the desk, just red chairs. I remember red plastic chairs. The walls were all sort of like a buttercup yellow. No notices, no typewriters, no phones on the desk. And this struck me as really odd. And I thought, what on earth is going on here? And then I sat down and I could see what appeared to me to be identical, this is going to sound strange, blue cars going past with blonde Nordic, very handsome Nordic blonde men in them, young men. And they all looked very identical. And then she realised I was watching these people and went and shut the door as if to say I wasn't meant to see that. And then it just kept giving this, because I said to her, I asked if I could go to the loo, and she was completely flummoxed by that.
Oh dear, we didn't think about that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about these cars or these vehicles?
I think when I look back on it that they were perhaps a screen memory of some sort. What I now know is a screen memory from what I've...
Any kind of type of car?
I can't... No, they were weird looking. They were almost like they were floating. If anything, they looked like a sports car, flat to the ground.
Like in Star Wars, there's a car they sort of hover car.
Yes, very much so. Like that one. Yes, yeah, that helps. And they were kind of very vivid, deep blue colour. And the guys were all wearing identical black turtleneck sweaters. And they were blue underneath, almost like a uniform. They were in uniform. So she went and shut this door as if I wasn't meant to see that. And what I didn't explain to you was that I'm in fact psychometric. Do you know what that means? Shall I explain that?
Explain any term you use.
Okay, I will do. Yes.
So that people know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So psychometry is basically. So I'm going to take my watch off to illustrate to you what psychometry is. You can take someone's watch or piece of jewellery, and you can hold it in your hand. And I believe everything comes down to energy in the end, and that's how I explain it. And I can read the energy of it, and I get both pictures of past and future events that are coming up for that person. And this is contextual to this interview, because what happened was that I was ushered into this office, and there was this African man sat behind another blank empty desk, and they said to me, he handed me his wristwatch, which is a huge silver wristwatch, and he said to me, we haven't got any more jobs. He said, but could you read that for me? And I never questioned it. I never thought, well, what the hell? How did you know I'm a psychometrist even? Because I've not told you. Or anything. And I tried to read it and I couldn't get anything off it. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't get anything off this. And I handed it back to him. And I felt very threatened at that point. And he looked at me and he said, oh, well, that's all right. Anyway, we've got a taxi waiting for you downstairs that will take you back to Manchester, Victoria. And I thought, well, how did you know, for a start, that I'm going to Manchester, Victoria, was my next question in my head. But it was almost like that didn't occur to me till I actually got to Manchester, Victoria. So and the funny thing was the
train you went up in real?
Well, do you know, I even wonder about that now. because the taxi man seemed to know exactly where I was going. He was also blonde, and he was silent all the way, and when I offered to pay him, he wouldn't have any money off me, and he just said, you can get out now. So I got out, back at Manchester Victoria.
I mean, what about trees, the countryside?
Didn't see anything. Don't even remember how I got back there. It was almost like we were just back. It was just weird. It was one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had.
So the whole event was different.
The whole event was, to me, when I look back on it, knowing what I know now years later, it was almost like staged, and it was like they were testing my abilities to read them and to pick up on their energies, whoever they were, to unmask them, so to speak. So that, I was starting to get to know more and more, because I'd read Communion by that point, and come to the conclusion that I'd had some kind of interaction with ETs, real live ETs. But also, can I also backtrack slightly and talk about Cyprus? Because that was during my nursing career. That
do what you wish to do.
Yes.
And
okay.
Do try and cover everything.
Yes.
In whatever order that fits.
Yes. Okay. I will. So one thing I didn't say was about when I was taken badly ill in Cyprus. I was a qualified staff nurse by then. I'd gone on holiday with another nurse who I was in charge of technically, because she was a nursing assistant, as they call them in the States. We called them auxiliary nurses. It's the same thing. And sorry.
Did she call them the American term or the English term?
The English term. But I'm saying that in case you've got any Americans watching, because
there might be an American.
Yeah. So anyway, we took these two quite badly disabled guys to Cyprus, and I was taken ill myself with food poisoning the first night, and I was admitted to hospital in the Greek Cypriot area on the outskirts of Napa. This was 1986 in the summer, and when I was first admitted, I was put into a bed, and there was a blonde guy in this bed next to me, and I felt such a bloody mess because, excuse my French, but I was in a right state. I'd been vomiting, etc., and nobody had cleaned me up or anything at that point, because I was in, I was so tired, so drained, and I thought it's just my luck to get put next to what I put down to a handsome Swedish man in the bed.
Well, where you go?
I know, in the bed next to me, and I just was cursing my luck, thinking, because I was single at that time, I was thinking, just my luck to be put next to someone that handsome, and I looked like death warmed up, so the next thing was that these 4 blonde visitors came to see him, and 2 girls and 2 guys that looked almost like they were related to each other. They looked so alike. I'm not saying they look like clones, but they looked...
Well, maybe they were just family of this guy.
They could have been family of that guy, yeah, which is what I assumed. Because I hadn't heard of Nordic ETs at that point. I had no idea about them. I want to stress that. I hadn't researched that. I didn't know about them. I had no idea that they existed or that anyone else had encountered them. And I was absolutely dying to go to the loo, and I was very disorientated because I was dehydrated, and I asked one of these girls if she would take me to the toilet. So one of these girls got me a wheelchair from somewhere, put me in it, took me to the loo, waited to help me on the loo, help me off the loo, and put me back in bed. Now you're going to laugh at this in a bit, because this is what happened. And then I woke up. I fell asleep. I was so exhausted, and I woke up at night to find an ordinary Cypriot-looking nurse putting what do they call it, a saline drip into my hand, because I got severe food poisoning, and telling me I nearly died, etc. And I thought, well, thanks for telling me that. I couldn't understand it, and I said, where's that guy gone? Because the bed next to me was perfectly made up and empty. And I thought, how did he manage to...
Including hospital corners?
Including hospital corners, yes, completely.
I'm being serious with it.
Yes, yeah, because we had to do them. They were very strict about it. I had to learn to do those. I can still do them now. Actually,
Oh my God.
yeah, the matron would inspect back then. You didn't get away with anything. So so I knew a hospital corner when I saw one. I still would, actually. And I was so puzzled and thrown by this. I said, where's that guy got in that bed that was next to ours? And she said to me, there's never been anyone in here. You've been in here on your own all the time since you've been admitted, young lady. She said, there's nobody in the bed next. What are you talking about? So I couldn't understand how. And I wanted to say to her, well, how could a non-existent lady visiting a non-existent patient have taken me to the toilet? And I was trying to tell her she took me to the toilet, and she wouldn't believe me. And the next day, they put me on antipsychotics medicine. But this was a physical event to me that had happened.
I mean, how did you know they were antipsychotics?
Because I knew all my tablets.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was a nurse at that point. They weren't actually antipsychotics. They were a form of Valium. They put me on imipramine. Have you heard of imipramine? No. It was a form of Valium to calm me down. I think they just wanted to calm me down. And they put me on intravenous saline because I kept vomiting. But then the next thing, it just keeps giving this. The next thing was that I just wanted to go to church because I was still very religious, and I was frightened I was going to die in a foreign country. You know, I was on my own. No one to visit, no family nearby, thousands of miles from my family. And I was too weak to even get out of bed. And I just prayed and prayed that someone would come and take me. And I said, can a nurse take me to the hospital chapel? So this nurse turns up on Sunday morning, and she says to me, I'll take you to the chapel. Nothing struck me as out of the ordinary about her at the time, apart from that she seemed to have abnormally large brown eyes. And I have provided a picture of her to yourself, which I'll obviously work with you with. She said, my name's Carola, and I'm going to take, I believe you've been asking to go to chapel, I'm going to take you. So she took me to what I thought was a chapel. Looked like a chapel on the outside, a typical Mediterranean, a small chapel. But I thought, how's this in the hospital grounds? Because it looked, I'm going from a modern hospital, newly built, to an old-fashioned chapel. And
but what was outside like? What about the clouds, the sunlight?
It felt very bright. And then I went from being very bright outside, and we went in, and it was very dark. It was so dark, and I felt her pushing me in the wheelchair. And then I heard the voice. But the funny thing was, she said to me, I'm going to take you to see our elder. I'm not going to take you to see a priest. I'm not going to take you to see the father in a Catholic country. I'm going to take you to see our elder, to talk to one of our elders. And
I mean, was the hospital, the Methodist hospital of something or other?
No, it was Catholic. It was Catholic, because they'd actually asked me if I didn't mind going to the Catholic service. What I'm going to call the ordinary staff.
Yeah.
So she took me there, and this guy, I have no memory of him coming from behind me. You would hear footsteps, wouldn't you? And I had no memory of his face. I didn't actually get to see his face. It was just like he was just there next to me. And he was on this side of me. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, why did you want to come to church? To find God. So I said, because that's where God is. And he said, no, it's not. You've got God all wrong. Now, why would a Catholic priest would not say that to you? He said, you've got it all wrong. He said, God, you don't have to come to a church to find God. God is all around us. He's in everything and through everything. He said, God is everywhere. And I only understand that now, 30 years later. What he was trying to say to me was that I was trying to put God in a box. And you can't put God in a box. He was trying to say to me that our consciousness is being limited. As she was saying the other day. And I only understand that so much more now, years later. But it was only after that she took me back, she put me in bed, that I realised there's something weird going on here. Something.
And I mean, all the time you're in a wheelchair going back. Is that right?
Well, I was in a wheelchair going there, but the funny thing is, I can't remember putting me in the wheelchair to come back. I can't even remember coming back through garden or anything.
Maybe you'd been healed by God or something.
I don't know. Do you know, I put it down to angelic intervention, and I wrote the blonde people next to me off as angels again, because I didn't know about Nordic ETs. So I was in such a religious mindset back then, you know, so everything, I interpreted everything through that limited lens of,
Well, I think that's fair.
Western Christianity, you know.
Fair to say.
Yeah. And then I got home and thought nothing more about it until years later, when I had this experience as a staff nurse, and I was on the way to work. We'd got off the Accrington Lancashire bus, me and this guy. He knew I was a staff nurse that night. And on the way to work, we met the same two guys, the same that I had earlier seen on my ceiling as a child. And the blonde one was the same guy that had visited me in I believe, disguise as a Mormon 10 years earlier, and he hadn't aged at all. He just looked exactly the same, and his face still looked about, I would say, about 28. But there's no flaws on the skin, there's nothing, they don't have freckles. You know, the faces just look perfect, too perfect.
Well, people on the Mediterranean diet can look pretty good.
Yeah, they can.
But, I mean,
yes,
why do you think it was somebody different?
Because I got his energy was so overwhelming to me. It was like I was picking up on their energy, whereas my friend, who was also an auxiliary nurse, he just thought that I fancied him. He accused me of fancying him, which I did actually, because he was very handsome. That is true to say.
So you did fancy him?
I did fancy him, something shocking. But
something shocking?
I did, he was gorgeous. I mean, have you met with these people? They are gorgeous.
Yeah, no, I think I have, but I can't say it definitely. But I mean, the Mediterraneans can be pretty damn good.
Well, they can, but he wasn't Mediterranean. Well, one looked Mediterranean, but the other one looked Swedish. He looked like a Norwegian, but he was looking at me, and our eyes just made contact with each other. And it's like he was saying, "You know me, and I know you, and one day you're going to know more about who I am." But at this point, I just knew that it was almost like we resonated on a spiritual level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does to you? You know, it was like we didn't have to say anything. It was just instant connection. Like he was saying, you belong, you know, we belong together, but you're not realising it. We're going to wake you up gradually, you know, because this is going to shock you. And then that same night, about 1 o'clock in the morning, a buzzer went off on the top floor, and we had all the psychiatric patients on the top floor. And nobody would think to ring the buzzer because they were all, you know, they weren't capable really of thinking, I'm going to go and get the nurse, if that makes sense.
But was there not a nurse on, I mean, the night nurse or whatever?
Yeah, I was about to do a roundup though.
Oh, you were the night nurse?
Yeah, yes I was,
okay,
yeah, it was 1 o'clock in the morning. So I went up to have a look, to check on them all. You know, you would do rounds every half an hour or so. And I came out the lift and I felt this terrible, oppressive feeling. I can't describe it. I was so frightened. And then I came round the bend.
Was it confining or compressive?
Almost compressive
Suffocating?
feeling. Suffocating. I felt nauseous. And I came around the bend of the corridor and I was confronted by what looked like a couple of reptilian beings, and I was absolutely terrified. And one was female, I sensed, and one was male. And the male was very tall, and he didn't look like... he had very pointy ears. He had like muddy coloured green skin. He wasn't... I say green, it was more of a muddy colour. Do you know what I mean? Like...
Dark brown.
Dark brown, leathery colour.
Yeah.
But over the years, as he's been with me and weird stuff's happened alongside me where he's been with me, then he's starting to be more supportive. He actually has supported me coming here today. Good. And to be here. Yeah.
Well, I'm very glad you've come here today.
Oh, why?
Because this is the opportunity for you to get things done. We're almost, I think, in the first hour.
Yes.
Do you want a break? Do you want a cup of tea or anything like that?
Yeah, a cup of tea would be nice.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
We've
and
done the first part.
Yeah.
And then you can collect your thoughts for the second part.
Yeah, because I'd like to tell you about where he actually has witnessed strange things happen.
Do you want to do that now? Since it's on your mind.
Can I wait and have a...
Okay,
Is
right.
that... Yeah, is that...
So we'll
yeah.
call this end of part one.
Okay, thank
And
you.
thank you very much, and we'll take
Yes.
a little break.
Yeah, okay.